Hi, I'm Mary. If you're a single Christian woman over the age of 40 and you love God, but you don't love being single quite so much, then this might be for you. Today, I want to talk about the difference between having standards that are realistic and unrealistic demands, and also why having appropriately high standards actually gets you closer to what you want in your life. Most of us think that we're pretty special, and in some ways we are. But I think when it comes to dating and relationships, many times our behavior is pretty predictable. A lot of times we'll declare with confidence, what we will and will not tolerate. I will not tolerate a man who does this, or you will not speak to me in this way. But then when we're actually in a situation with someone that we really like, all of those boundaries and declarations go out the window. I think a lot of times the problem isn't just raising your standards, it's maintaining your standards. I know for me, that was a big problem for a lot of years, is that I would start off with a high standard, but then if the guy's behavior deteriorated, I would just tolerate it. And not even just in dating, in other relationships as well, with family, friends, coworkers. I think a lot of us are afraid to have high standards because we're afraid that's going to make us difficult or high maintenance or too picky. But the truth is that healthy people respect standards and boundaries, and that is what you want. You want relationships with healthy people. You cannot have a healthy relationship when one or both of you is an unhealthy person. And frankly, the people who normally complain about you having standards and boundaries are the people who want to violate them. And they also will benefit if you would just lower your standards. And listen, having high standards does not mean that you are unrealistic and demanding. There's a difference between a reasonable standard and an unrealistic demand. For example, a realistic standard is you need advance notice before going out on a date. Unrealistic is you only go to 5-star restaurants. An appropriate standard is if a man says he'll call you and then he disappears for weeks and then suddenly resurfaces, you don't rearrange your life to accommodate his reappearance. Unrealistic demand is you expect for him to communicate with you all day, every day, throughout the day. An appropriate standard is you're clear about what you're looking for in a partner. Unrealistic is they have to be completely perfect in every area of life. Having standards is not about requiring perfection. It's about living in alignment. And that's being in alignment with who God says you are, being in alignment with your own values, and then being in alignment with the people in your life. I think we have to be careful about using scripture out of context, but scripture tells us not to be unequally yoked, meaning don't be in close personal relationships with people who do not share your faith and your values. I'm not saying that you cannot be friends with people who aren't Christians, but you're not going to have a healthy, fruitful relationship when you're unequally yoked. And that, by the way, that phrase is talking about oxen. So before, the world became industrialized, farmers would use a pair of oxen to plow the fields. And you put a yoke on the oxen. It's a thing that goes around their neck, and it keeps them in pace with each other. Well, if they are unequal animals trying to share this yoke, then what you end up with is the stronger ox sort of dragging the weaker one along, or the weaker one slowing down the stronger one. So you have to have two oxen that are matched accordingly in order to be able to be productive in your work. The same is true in relationships. When we're unequally yoked with somebody, then, we wonder why it's so difficult. And a lot of times it's because we have a standard and now we've lowered it to try to accommodate the other person, and then we wonder why it's not working. So here are a few standards that I think will help if you're trying to have a wonderful life. Number one, you are a person of your word and you value the same thing in other people. We're in a culture that devalues our words. So words have lost their value and their meaning. They haven't lost their power. And so we're very casual about, I'll call you, I'll text you, we'll get together, we'll have lunch. And we don't mean that. We're not going to follow up on it. And I learned to be careful about that, because when I was younger, I had a work colleague that when I would say like, oh, well, let's have lunch, she'd say, great, get out your calendar, when is good? And I didn't really mean like, let's really set it up. I was just saying that. But that's not being a woman of your word. If you're a woman of your word and you say, let's have lunch, you're prepared when the other person says, great, when are you available tomorrow? Now, I usually say with something like this, before you can evaluate other people, you need to start with yourself, okay? Jesus said, don't be trying to get the splinter out of somebody else's eye when you've got a plank in your own eye. So, charity begins at home. If you say you're going to call. If you RSVP to an event that you're going, go. If you make a commitment, follow through. Now, things happen, life happens, and you just cannot follow through with something, in which case, let the other person know. The way I heard it said one time is, if you tell something to somebody before it happens, it's a reason. If you wait until afterwards, it's an excuse. Meaning, for example, if I tell my boss, I cannot make it to the meeting this afternoon because blah, 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 then that's a reason. If I wait until the meeting has already passed and I say, oh, I didn't go to the meeting because I had such and such, then it's really an excuse. And so, like I said, things happen. But there's a difference between, hey, I woke up and I have a fever and I don't think we should have lunch today, versus I just don't feel like it. And so start with yourself, being a woman of your word and following through on your commitments. You really cannot get mad at other people for flaking out on you if you're the one flaking out a lot too. When you treat your own word as valuable, then you're going to naturally gravitate towards people who do the same. Number two, you're clear about what you want and you don't accept less just to avoid being alone. And this can apply to dating relationships, friendships, time with family, going to lunch with colleagues. If certain qualities matter to you, shared values, emotional maturity, being able to behave appropriately in public, or attraction to another person's stability, whatever, then it's okay to wait for it. Accepting less than what you truly want almost never leads to getting what you want. Here's an example. When I'm teaching students about negotiating your salary, what I tell them is the time to get what you want is before you accept the job. Once you're in the job, you don't have any leverage to negotiate with. A friend of mine one time accepted a job offer at a company, and then she was mad literally for the next 10 years. She was mad about her salary, and she felt that they didn't pay her enough. And I was like, well, girl, you're the one who accepted the offer. And if accepting a low salary does not eventually lead to a much higher salary. It keeps you at a low place. And the same is true in relationships. When you settle for what you don't want, the other person doesn't magically transform into your dream person. I mean, that fairy tale about the frog that's the prince. And a lot of times we think, well, if I just kiss enough frogs, they'll turn into a prince. No, they just stay frogs. And you just end up kissing frogs. When you settle for something out of fear, it produces more fear. It does not magically transform into a completely different situation. This is where I think we have to be careful about like Hollywood. The show Sex and the City, for example, Carrie and Mr. Big. I mean, he strung her along for what, 10 years or something, and then stands her up at the altar, and then magically he just realizes that she's the woman for him, and he pursues her, and that's crazy town right there. It's ridiculous. It's not reality. So when you're settling for a situation thinking it's somehow going to transform into what you really want, you are deceiving yourself. Another standard that I would encourage you to adopt would be to respect yourself. And you also require respect from others. Respect shows up in everyday behavior, okay? So does disrespect. So let me give you an example of some disrespectful behaviors. Your date arrives to pick you up and he's already been drinking, or you meet him at the restaurant and he's already had a few drinks. You have a friend who is chronically late. They never apologize and they always have an excuse because they were busy and whatever came up that was so much more important, and they're totally fine with leaving you sitting there waiting for them for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. A boss who belittles you, or coworkers who make little jabs at you or insults and then say like, oh, well, I was just kidding. Being in a relationship with someone who's dishonest with you. Frankly, allowing your own family to treat you like the family punching bag, meaning, they're having a bad day, so they take it out on you. Any variation of those behaviors is disrespect. And I think a lot of times we want to give the person the benefit of the doubt. And listen, I understand 1 Corinthians 13 says love believes the best of people. But I also think that you have to be realistic. It's not loving to imagine someone has good intentions when they're demonstrating that they don't. It is not loving towards yourself to allow someone to treat you like that. And it's not loving towards them, because people keep behaving in whatever way that you tolerate. I think Dr. Phil was the one who said, we teach people how to treat us. And so when you do not check someone in their disrespectful behavior, number one, they may not even realize they're being disrespectful. But number two, doesn't seem to bother you, so they're just going to keep doing it. And listen, you don't need to have some big dramatic confrontation and some, sit down serious talk, and I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to tell you honestly, with a lot of people, that type of conversation just doesn't do any good. They don't get it. They don't want to hear it. They don't understand it. And I'll tell you that many times the way that you increase people's respect is you just pull back. And I'll tell you that we value things that are rare. So when a person is always available, you always pick up the phone, you always answer that text right away, you're always available for a last minute date or get together. Well, you're not rare. You're very easy to get time with and get attention from. So you must not be that special. And when you start to pull back, people will respect you more. I've seen this in many types of relationships that I've had, whether it's men that I date, family members, friends. When I'm being treated in a disrespectful way, it's clear the other person doesn't value me. Well, okay, if you don't value me, then you probably don't want me around. And so I don't need to have a big conversation about it. I just will pull back. Okay, and it's not pouting and it's not playing mind games and manipulating. It's just saying, you know what, I'm going to step back from this. I'm not sure this is the right place for me. And listen, if the other person doesn't notice, you haven't lost anything. And if they do notice, you don't owe them an explanation, but you just start to say, you know what? I'm not going to continue to tolerate this behavior. Marianne Williamson, I heard her give a talk one time where she said, people who are like emotional terrorists, it's like they're coming in and they're throwing black paint all over your home. I mean, if someone came into your home with a can of black paint and they just started throwing it all over the walls and all over your stuff, I mean, I think you would stop them. And yet when people are doing that emotionally in our lives, it's like we just stand there and go like, well, they're just having a hard day. And that's not godly. Jesus did not tolerate disrespectful behavior. He confronted it or he walked away from it. Now listen, if you start raising your standards, your relationships are probably going to change. And it may not always be in the way that you are hoping. I've had people ask me like, do you think you're single because you're too picky? And I'm like, no, I think the opposite was true for me for a number of years. I was not picky enough. Now, when I started to raise my standards, the dating pool got much smaller because it used to be anyone who asked me out, I'd say yes. Because you never know, he might be a frog now, but if I give him a good kiss, he could turn into a prince. And now I just know, you know what? People are who they are. And it's, you know, for example, I had a guy ask me out and we were not compatible in terms of our income and our profession. Nice guy, okay? But this just wasn't what I was looking for. And when he asked me out, I was tempted to say like, oh, sure, we can go out, and either like one date and I'll be nice to him and then I won't go out with him again. Or maybe, you know, I can be okay with it even though I know this isn't what I want. And that's really a cruel thing to do to the other person because you're leading them on and you're making them think they have a chance. And so I really kind of had to man up and say, you know what, I don't think so. And it turns out that is a much kinder thing to do because you let the person know right off the bat, this isn't, don't waste your time here. One of my girlfriends, she's one of my best friends, and she had a friend who was just toxic and just nasty and horrible. I didn't like her. And she constantly was treating my friend terribly and hurting her feelings and manipulating and being mean and all that. And she and my friend were going through some kind of a disconnect. They were having some sort of argument. I can't remember exactly. And this girl called me and was saying like, oh, I've always thought you were great. You know, I'd love for us to be friends and like maybe we can go to lunch sometime. And I just flat out told her, I said, no, I don't think so. Because I thought like, I'm not opening the door and inviting crazy into my house with her can of black paint. So in being honest, it just closes the door. And then the other person isn't like in this game of, well, maybe I've got a shot at this. You're just going to be honest with them. And remember, we go back to point number one, which is you're a woman of your word. And listen, when you start raising your standards and you start to change, other people may drift away. They may get angry because they can no longer treat you in the way that they've been treating you. Now, some people will rise to the occasion and they will be able to grow when you grow. Sometimes you're going to grow and they're going to move off and drift away. And that's okay. I think sometimes, especially as single women, we hear that statement that, you know, friends come and, or men come and go, but friends are forever. No, not every friend is a forever friend. And just because you've been friends for a long time does not mean that it is the best thing for you to continue to be friends in the future. I think about it like this. You may have, I mean, I was going through my closet the other day. I still have my senior prom dress. And I have it because my mom made it. I loved that dress. I mean, and like I said, she handmade it. And I don't wear that dress. I'm not going to wear my senior prom dress. I still have it, but it doesn't mean that it's something usable. I keep it because, I like looking at it, but it's not a functional, usable piece of my wardrobe. And there are other items that when I've had them for a long time, I look at them and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this. I've had it for a long time. It's not serving me anymore. Sometimes relationships are like that. Sometimes relationships are, I've been friends with this person for a very long time and it doesn't fit anymore. Okay, it's scratchy and, has holes in it and misshapen and I don't feel good anymore in it. Maybe it's time to let it go. And you have to be willing to let people drift away and not hold on to them because you're afraid of being alone. Now, when you have, if you have friends who drift away, that opens up space for God to send you more godly friends. But also, you're going to feel better about yourself because you're no longer allowing yourself to be an emotional punching bag in your relationships. You're not just putting up with everyone's bad behavior and then expected to just be okay with it when they tell you that they're sorry. I was friends with a woman for a few years that, she wasn't physically abusive, but I would say that her behavior was emotionally abusive because she would have a big tantrum and act out and, then she'd apologize. And then a few weeks later, she'd do the same thing, tantrum, act out, make people feel bad, and then apologize. And that's what an abuser does. An abuser hits you, then they feel bad about it, they apologize. It'll never happen again, but it always happens again. And when you keep staying there, you're not a victim anymore. Now you're a participant. And I realized in my relationship with this woman that was her pattern. And then I had to decide, do I want to keep participating in this cheap, tacky drama? For me, I said, you know what? I really don't want to do that. Now, I'm older today. And for me, what I have realized is I do not like it when I am upset for 2 or 3 days because somebody else did something. I really don't like living like that. I don't like other people's problems and behavior living in my head and causing me to not sleep and causing me to not be able to focus on my work. Today, when I'm around somebody who is what I would say is like a tornado roaring through the lives of others, I realize that, you know what? I don't have to stand there in the tornado. I can leave the scene of the storm and I can let them do whatever damage they're going to do, but I can protect myself from it. And listen, sometimes you can't get away from people. It might be someone in your family. It might be somebody at work, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay in constant close fellowship with them. It is okay to have a boundary. Dr. Henry Cloud says that a boundary is like a fence and it keeps unwanted things out, okay? But when you start to have those standards, frequently other people will rebel. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with this other person is angry and upset and lashing out because I'm doing something different. And in a way, it's kind of fair. I mean, when someone changes up on you, it's very natural to feel like the rug got pulled out from under you. But then they have a choice. They can either get with the new program or they can find someone else to be their punching bag. Now listen, low standards almost always lead to heartbreak. And if you're dealing with heartbreak right now, I've placed a free training beneath this video. If you click on the link, it's called the ABCs of Healing, totally free, to help you start to get past that broken heart. And I would encourage you to start to raise your standards, at the very least in terms of your own behavior. And, listen, you don't have to harden your heart to protect it. You just need strong standards to support you, okay? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Post a comment because I read them. And I just want to thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.